So welcome back, everyone. Let us just take a moment to settle back in from our break, and we'll just do about a 1-minute sit in the silence. I'll ring the bell when we're done. I'm going to ring the bell, and when you can no longer hear the bell, please open your eyes and return fully alert. So we have our panel discussion for this late morning on educational equity and some of the thought leaders in not only the coalition of schools educating mindfully, but also thought leaders in the field around how are we educating more equitably and more mindfully in our work. And so joining us is Barnaby Spring, Director of Mindfulness and Education for New York City Department of Education, the esteemed Cheryl Watkins of Network 13, Chief of Schools, Chicago Public Schools, and our own James Butler, SEL Mindfulness Specialist, Austin, founder of Mindful Classrooms as well. So. I just realized I didn't say my own name. I'm Toby Scruggs Hussein. I have TCS Inc. I was a high school principal for over 17 years and then went on to do some nonprofit work. And I am the COSM president. So very pleased to be here and hold this role and support the work that is truly life-changing for our students, our teachers, our educators, everyone in our educational system. So as we dive a little bit, we've talked a lot about equity over the course of our time together. And a little bit of side conversation that we have had as well, and that we really want to make explicit, is that whiteness is not to be shameful. Whiteness is not something to be guilty about or have negative feelings about. Whiteness is merely an adjective that is describing our system, describing all the water that we're getting wet in. And it simply just is what it is. And so given that it is the experience, then what is it that we make of the experience? And how do we be in the experience from a place of greater love, greater compassion, greater empathy? So I ask, when you think about whiteness and its impact on our educational system, how are you embodying the concepts of love, of kindness, of compassion? How are you bringing that into your work?
Let's have the non-white chick speak first. Listen, yesterday in my session, I said to the participants, as we did a privilege walk, a privilege line, and one of them, as we asked, how are you feeling right now, what's your response? And she said, white privilege. And then I went to, after we heard from everyone else, I went to a slide with me on it. And right there in the front of our own privilege line that we did in my own network of 31 schools, there's me out in front of everybody else. And I said, this is not about whiteness. This is about privilege. This is about recognizing who we are, where we are, Now what are we going to do about it? So it's never what you have. And ladies, I want you to really think about this. Men, maybe you don't think about this so much. But ladies, we've got lots of things in our closets. You don't have to buy anything new if you're like me. You don't have to buy anything new. You may even have some things in your closet with the tag still on it. But you pull it out and you put it with something else and you mix it up, and now you've got a fresh new outfit. So it's not what you have, it's what you do with what you have.
I would say, I'm sorry, Toby. What was the exact question? What do I do? Compassion, how do I bring that into?
Yes, how do you bring greater compassion and love into our work? Especially when whiteness has such a negative connotation at times, and to really transform that as well, because it is freeing to not hold it.
Yes, so I would say the biggest thing that I do and bring into my work is listen. Like, I cannot stress enough the power of listening, especially as a cis, hetero, white male. Listen. I just try to listen, and listen authentically, and listen with compassion, and try to really hear what students are saying, what my colleagues are saying, what teachers are saying, what administrators are saying, and just like model that, and really just like, again, I keep talking about it, but just deep listening to understand and notice any discomfort that might arise in these conversations, and and also just something that I'm having to do with my colleagues. Because I live in Texas, I'm from the Midwest. Like, it is niceness. It's nice, but as Robin DiAngelo said, niceness is not going to end racism. So having to name, like, hey, if I say something offensive, please talk to me. Please call me out. Like, I want to learn. And it doesn't, like, I'm not going to intentionally offend anybody, but it doesn't matter my intent if the impact is great and is harmful. So just holding that space, and then just truly listening.
Thank you for naming that, James. One of the things that came up for me, and then we'll definitely give you an opportunity to answer the question, Barnaby. One of the things that came up for me in your previous talk this morning, in the mentorship talk, and you're talking about your experience in Namibia, and then going there with kind of a savior complex, and then stepping away from that. You haven't named it, but what I've experienced of you and your deep passion about listening and deep listening is cultural humility. So there is a term that can be used, and Rachel Remen writes really beautifully about it. There's an article that you can definitely Google, Rachel Remen, cultural humility. That's not the exact title, but it'll get you there. And that's part of what it is. And cultural humility isn't just for one particular cultural group. It's for us all to have a sense of cultural humility. And how do we bring that and carry that into the work? And so, James, I just really thank you for highlighting that. And I don't know if you've ever labeled it for yourself as that at all, but that's really one of the stances of it, is how do we be in that curiosity and be in that listening space to simply observe and learn, and then be able to respond, and not just act, respond, right? Brother Barnaby.
I've had a very strange journey. So it took me a long time to understand that while I'm not terminally unique, it took me a long time to understand that I was a white male. I grew up thinking that the man who was my father at the time, who was actually my stepfather, who was a French Haitian Catholic, dark skin and dark hair, was my father. I had brothers and sisters who were Haitian, I didn't know who the hell I was. And my mother got married and divorced and brought in new men, and we just were like shapeshifters. You just adapted to whatever the dominant, so I was a rootin' tootin' cowboy in Arizona with a crew cut. I was a hippie child. I had a fourth stepfather, though, who happened to be a black civil rights worker in the state of Illinois. Springfield is where he did a lot of his work. And of all the men who were my father, right, my biological father, who was a Jewish intellectual, and these other men, there was only one man who ever looked at my brother and I and said something very clear and very specific. And he said, I want you boys to know something. I love you as if you were my own son. Never heard that from my own father. Never heard that from any of these other men. So there was, and then I go to Boys Town. One kid who's sleeping on one side of me, his parents are in the Black Panthers, they're running, this kid has to be put in institutionalized youth care. Another kid on the other side of me is a Mexican kid from Bakersfield, his parents pick grapes. And I'm being told by my mother in letters, who's worried that I'm going to lose my identity, that I have an uncle who was a union organizer in the state of California, who worked with Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie and wrote the first anti-bomb song. And then I'm at Boys Town, being raised in an Orthodox Catholic religion, being cultivated to be either a politician, a Republican politician, and so all the insanity and all the confusion. So let me just say that to bring love and compassion in my work today, in this work around equity, is I have one litmus test. And the litmus test is this: when I engage in purposeful activity to consciously dismantle or move in another direction than one that I know I've been habitually ingrained to move in, I check to see what's motivating it. If it's guilt, it's no good. If it's self-loathing, and believe me, I have reservoirs of guilt, I have reservoirs of self-loathing, self-hatred. I got them. I don't know about you, but they're in there in me. But when I take an action, I have one rule. If I do not feel a feeling of liberation, of happiness and joy and freedom in the midst of doing what I'm doing, pardon the language, well, I'm full of it. Right? I don't want Tracy to have to edit everything that I speak at. So things that... Okay. I mean, the test is, do you feel liberated? Do you feel that something, some deep, heavy weight is being lifted from your body? That's the test. And baby, it goes beyond skin color, creed, and it's deep. And yet it's also about skin. It's both at the same time, and it's not both at the same time. It transcends this dualistic trap that we're in. And it's all about love, and it's all about taking care of each other for the very short time that we have to do so in this precious experience.
Thank you. And this brings us to a wonderful transition. I was going to do another question. We're going to go with, we've discussed allyship a bit, and so I'd love for you all to be able to share what allyship means to you in this work, and how do you use your allies also to advance mindfulness and equity? How do you use your allies maybe for yourself even personally? And feel free to share with us, what allyship is not as well. And so, what does that look like? Because we've encouraged our members of the coalition to start securing our racial healing allies. So what does that look like in this work?
So I will start. So I mentioned Dr. Angela Ward from AISD is somebody that has taught me a great deal. And talking about what allyship is not, she actually she doesn't use the word ally. She uses a co-conspirator because being an ally, oftentimes, like when we talk about what ally is not, is just standing there, just standing next to you, but not like being and obviously that's just like semantics, but like just that thought of being a co-conspirator and working with each other. And so thinking about having allies and what that means, and pushing each other and listening to each other and having intentional time. I'm thinking specifically about like white allies, having intentional time to talk about race so that we become more comfortable talking about race. This was the first, and like I've talked about race with like groups of like 10, 12 people. This was the first time that I like openly talked about race in front of a whole mess of people. And I'm growing, you know, but having something that's really helpful is having those intentional times to talk about how race is interacting with my life. So I think that just having those times, and then also, like I mentioned, like white affinity group, because I noticed myself within the last couple of years, like really like being more comfortable talking about race with people of color, and I can't lean on people of color to talk about race because that has the potential to re-traumatize. And that was a big learning curve for me. And had a colleague call me on that, and it was really humbling and really powerful. So having those intentional times and just in doing the work, being with each other, being and doing, to quote Toby.
And I think it's important to highlight too, it's not only the re-traumatization that can happen, but it's also about having to do your own work. You have to take responsibility for doing your own work in this work because it's about your own awareness, it's about your own growth. And so you can't necessarily like piggyback on someone else's stuff to do that.
So I'm going to go back and talk about my presentation from yesterday. I conducted that presentation with Doug Stallings. And for those of you all who may not know, Doug is a Caucasian male. He is definitely my ally in this work right now. And I think that your allies change depending on the space and the place. But I've known Doug now for 3 years. And it wasn't until last year, so for me, I'm always thinking in academic years and not calendar years. In 2018, I had been on the job for 1 year and went to a session at an institute about confronting race and privilege and bias. I sat in the session, I texted Doug, I said, "You've got to get down here right now." I texted one of my principals and said, "You got to go to this session." And the work that we've done now within Chicago Public Schools in our network of 31 schools was birthed. Now, I've got lots of ideas, and I am that person. You don't want to ride with me? I'm going by myself. I'm going to do it. But it didn't take that. Doug was with me every step of the way. Doug is the one that I said, "Doug, what do you think? Like, what do you think if we did this?" And he said, "You want to do that?" And I said, "I absolutely want to do that. I want people to confront their own biases. I confront mine." That's how Man in the Mirror was birthed. And yes, I do love Michael Jackson, I do. And I do think Man in the Mirror is one of the most powerful songs that he's ever written. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make that change. I think that's what moves me. But to have Doug right next to me and say, "What do you think about this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you want to do that, Doug?" He's like, "Yeah, I think we should." And I'm like, "Well, let's clean this up a little bit. Let's do that." And we just check each other. Now, I don't need a Caucasian male to tell me how to be black and how to move in and out of different settings. I don't need that. But I absolutely trust him. I respect him. He's my Batman. I'm his Robin. That's how we play off each other. And I absolutely couldn't do the work without him. I depend on that. So that's a great question, and I got to talk to him about it now.
He's my ally. Thank you.
I have to, you just compel me to be very clear. The best work that I have done in the career that I've had in the New York City Department of Education, the best work has always been done under the leadership of Black women. My direct supervisor, her name is Dr. Deborah Lamb, and she lives in the community of Brooklyn. She knows Brooklyn. Cheryl Watson Harris is the first deputy chancellor. And look, I had other chancellors, I had other people. These people wouldn't talk to me. Some of them were white too, thought I was crazy. I mean, I had to deal with a lot of discrimination from white folks, because they thought I wasn't behaving appropriately. I thought it was inappropriate too, until I started meeting leaders of color who were saying, that's not inappropriate, that's you. I said, what? I did not realize how stifled I had been and how much I had given my power over to others. Because remember, I come from an abusive background, so I'm not clear about a lot of things. I have to constantly check in with people about everything. Left to my own devices, it's a mess. So these Black women are championing me, guiding me, giving me my parameters, have high expectations, nurture me. I wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. They are allies. And I'm an ally to them. Now there's this guy who's the chancellor right now, Richard Carranza. In my career in the New York City Department of Education, I've never seen a chancellor from any race or creed stand up and say, this is the most segregated school system in New York, in the country. In that moment, I loved him. I felt it. I was like, I love him. So what's an ally in that situation? That's a gritty version of ally. That means if people mess with this dude, I'm gonna mess with them. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'll keep on working on it, I'll go to therapy, but if you attack this dude in the New York Post and call him a racist or say some crap that I know, having been a long-term citizen in the city of New York City, are people being incredibly manipulative because they're incredibly afraid. So it's not their fault, they're not bad people, but he wants to create a public education system for every child in New York City. Not just the privileged few who figured out how to turn some of those schools into private schools. Now look, we're all worried about mindfulness being accepted. Roe versus Wade a decision was made about that 60 years ago, and we haven't done a damn thing about it. So we're going to have to be patient with mindfulness, right? Toby doesn't know me that well, so she's trying to calm me down. She doesn't know that I know how
I was gonna say,
Right.
I want to get up and give you a hug.
Yeah, so, you know, yeah. So
Just call me
that's
the
just,
quail that was calming you.
oh,
Just
just so you know, I can inhabit that territory and come back. But I want you to know that that's the situation. That too is an ally. He looks at me and says, I got your back. I look at him and he says he's got my back. So that's important too.
Thank you. Hold on to that one, mister.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk around because I can just take off the lapel mic. Does anybody have any questions for the panel? Because I'll let you ask into this mic.
Yeah.
And I've got more questions if we don't, so it's okay. Either way. Okay.
That's not me being triggered. When I get triggered, it's a whole nother shit. Swinging from the chandelier.
This is sort of a question. sort of a thought, but I think that when you talk about allies, I was thinking that in one of my roles at my school, I'm co-leading a group for boys of color at our school, which is ironic, right? And I co-lead this with a male teacher of color. And one of the things that we found kind of hardest was just to get the boys to feel comfortable just talking about race. So I had to say, I'm white, and I know that I'm white, and it's okay. And they were all like, you know, and I was like, sometimes I'm gonna leave the group so you can talk without me, and that's okay. You're not gonna hurt my feelings by talking about what your experience is at our school as a boy of color. And so it felt like kind of both like trying to name the whiteness in the school and name my own whiteness, and also try to be an ally, a co-conspirator.
Can I just comment on that
Please.
really quickly? So, and I don't know you, you don't know me, and this is being recorded, and so if it needs to be edited out, you can edit it out, whatever needs to happen, right? Don't expect kids to do what they've never been able to do before, something to that magnitude, right? Because adults haven't done that before. And we're now asking kids to do it. So it's gonna take a little bit to get them to that place. So you eat the elephant in small pieces and chunks, not take off a trunk and eat it, right? And that's okay. I don't know that I have ever been asked, so Cheryl, how do you feel about white people and what's been done to African Americans historically? I don't think I've ever been asked that. I don't know if they're afraid I'm gonna give a Barnaby impassioned speech, which I love, right? Because I can go from here to there too.
Difference between passion and abuse.
But here's the thing, right? As an African American woman, I'm also very careful about, you know, sister girl, neck rolling, you know, finger popping, hands on the hip type stereotype if I give a response. So I'm very cognizant of that. So I just want to put that out there, right? Like, I think it's and so again, when I talk about race, privilege, bias, and equity in the workshops that I do, I'm careful to point out that I too have biases, and if I do, and I'm a person of color, then don't sit and look at me and tell me you don't, because you do.
I don't know if this question is appropriate, but I think it is. I'm Lauren. I teach in a very affluent school district here in the Chicago area. I have, there's not much diversity in my school, and if there is, it comes from an international university that's part of our district. And we get children from Nigeria and parts of Korea, and they're usually missionary children. Their parents are studying like divinity at the university. So I've had a student for 9 years. He's like the one and only black kid in his class, surrounded by a bunch of white students. And he's angry all the time. And a teacher at my school has a theory that he's angry because he doesn't know who to be and how to be himself. And he's surrounded by white privileged children. And he's trying to figure out how to be himself. He's from Nigeria, but his parents want to stay here because of the education he's getting at our school, which is wonderful. And I want to help him, and so do all of us teachers, but we're all white females. The only man of color in my school is our amazing maintenance man, who's from Jamaica. And so I just need some advice. I want to help him, and I don't have like a leg to stand on. I don't have any sort of, can't even dip my toes in his world, because I don't know what it's like.
And then you can, Toby. First of all, he's not black.
I know.
So you called him black.
Yeah.
And then you said he's Nigerian.
Yeah.
So that's an issue.
I know, and that's what he's trying to figure out.
No. we're not talking
No.
about him.
Okay,
We're not talking about him. This is not a kid issue. This is an adult issue.
yeah.
And so that's what this is all about. That's
Which
what
is
this
why
work
I'm
is all
asking the
about.
question, so thank you.
Yes. So, okay, don't put up a defense, right? Because I can go right in. I want to help you.
Yeah,
So the first thing is there is a difference between a skin color and a country of origin,
yeah.
right? So I'm African American, and I've traced my little history back to Africa. I'm so glad I could. I'm not African, I'm African American,
Yeah.
right? He is African. Knowing that little bit should change how you interact with individuals, right? So yesterday when we were in our session, I said, you know, there were only a couple of people of color, and then you said to me, well, no, I am. I said, wow. In my head, I'm like, didn't know that. That changes how I now interact with you because I know a little bit differently. The first thing I'm going to tell you to do is to talk to him and say, what do you think would help? Put it out there, ask him. He might tell you, I don't need anything.
That's what he says. We have asked in so many ways.
Why don't you believe him?
Because his parents are trying to figure out where the anger comes from as well. And we as teachers are almost scared to say to him the truth, what we think is true.
Yeah, but, okay.
Because we're,
That's white privilege.
yeah, okay.
She's like, sorry. That's white privilege, right? You think you can tell him what's really wrong with him.
We don't want to tell him we've asked so many times, and
He won't tell you.
I know.
He doesn't trust you.
Okay, I'm
He
sorry
doesn't-
if I sound ignorant, but,
You're not sounding
want-
ignorant.
okay.
No, I think this is very helpful.
okay.
But again, I'm saying, if you've asked him and he said, you know, there's nothing wrong with me, then, you know, go, all right, dude, no problem.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Just if you need me, here I am.
Okay,
Here's my school email address. Here's the school phone number. Call and leave a message, check in with them, that kind of thing. But you don't force help.
yeah.
You, again, like little bite size, right?
Yeah.
Can I just pop in really fast, Marjorie? I also just want to name that it's important that we never preface our questions, particularly in our equity work, around whether or not it's an appropriate question. Because that's what keeps us all ignorant. I mean, every question in creating a safe space to have these types of talks and conversations, everything has to be able to put on the table because there's always deep learning that happens for everyone, even the facilitators, even the panel, all of us. And so we have to give each other grace and love and freedom to ask what we need to ask. Because that's how we're going to grow, that's how we're going to heal, that's how we're going to get better to serve. It starts with being able to have the trust to ask those conversations. All right, Brother Barnaby, and then I'll go to this question.
Just quickly, in the film, May I Be Happy, since this is about mindfulness, there is a section where a mother talks about how mindfulness saved her son. She happens to be black, son happens to be black, but she talks about his anger, and you were talking about this man's anger. And sometimes, you know, she says in the film, so it's not me talking, it's her talking, that nothing could reach him. And even when he was given the solution, her son, whose big brother was shot and killed, that just made him angrier. Everything just makes him angry. So mindfulness was this thing that could reach, and the mother says it so eloquently in this film. I urge you all to watch it, because mindfulness could reach past all this conceptual talk that we get into, this discursive stuff. And it, as Amanda Jacobs Moreno at the Erickson Institute says, it teaches without instructing. It heals without, you become the doctor of yourself. And, you know, the other thing is what an exciting place that young man is in. wow, like, wow, you're on the hero's journey, man. This is powerful for you. What are you going to do with this situation? What are the stories of all the great men and women who were in these situations? Wow, how amazing is this? That anger, that energy, when you become friends with that, that's good. There's a deep wisdom behind that. I'm an actor. I know how to scream and yell. But when I get triggered, I won't get triggered in front of a group of people. I'll go somewhere and get triggered. If I was triggered, I'd get out of here. But we all have ways of dealing with this. And I think I just want to, it's again, and reiterate, it's nobody's fault. And it's everybody's responsibility. And you're showing up. You're showing up.
And you're even showing up by asking the question. And what it is also done for me as a leader in this work is being able to say, you know what, I need to offer to the COSM Equity page the great books by African American male authors about working with Black boys and our young men. Because there's so much good work out there that is just not being tapped into. And yet so many of us work with young Black men. And so, Baruti Kafele is someone who is just outstanding, and he does a talk for Black boys more than monthly on a podcast. So there are just numerous resources, and I will put that list together and make sure that that gets out to us. Because the body of work is there about what works. Again, it's the matter of, are we transforming ourselves enough to care enough to go use that body of work and put it into practice? And the reason often that we don't is because it makes us uncomfortable. You literally will have to change your teaching practice. Like, that's how deep it is. So the way you've been doing some things will have to shift to get a difference in our outcomes. We have a question over here, but do you want me to wait on question?
Yeah, can I just say one thing that came to mind is thinking about how, and I don't know the exact situation, but thinking about how you and your colleagues talk about your student when your student's not around, and just being very honest with yourself and being curious about how you're discussing your student, and just being thoughtful about that. And something, and you didn't use these words, but just like, I hear a lot of times, like working with at-risk youth and thinking if we think in a deficit mindset, like that we're gonna approach with a deficit mindset. So thinking of opportunity, Barnaby said, this is an amazing opportunity, tapping into the opportunity. So just being curious about, thinking about how we're discussing, all of our students, but specifically students that we might be having a harder time connecting with. How we talk about our students when they're not around matters.
Thank you so much. Emily has a comment or question here.
I'm from rural New Hampshire, not the most diverse place in the world, as you can imagine. And I'm wondering how I bring this back to my district, which is an upper middle class, very white district. And how to start these conversations with my colleagues, with our administration, when there really isn't a lot of representation from people of color, or people who are not, cisgender, heterosexual, like follow the lines down. How do I start that?
I would, I think I mentioned a little while ago, having like affinity groups, affinity partners, and just having conversation. We're talking about like systemic problems. So having these conversations with affinity partners, with affinity groups, to start the conversation on like a district-wide level, because I don't know. I know that I'm not the only expert, and I think we've got an equity expert that has something to say, and I would definitely welcome. Well, I saw your hand raised.
I think that you are in a position of great strength because it is white folks that need to do this work. It's not folks of color. This is not our job. When I try to teach about whiteness and white supremacy culture, I make damn sure that I have a white person with me because it doesn't get received the same way. But I would say that we have been raised to be ignorant and to be sheeple who don't question the information that we take in. And so a good place to start, as with mindfulness, is to start internally, right? And so I would offer that you can listen to Eric Michael Dyson, Tears We Cannot Stop, like that book alone. If you can just listen to that, and he has so many YouTube videos, but it has to be an internal change. That's number one. But the second thing, I think that you made a fantastic point about not conflating race, culture, and ethnicity, right? So when we do that, when we conflate those or confuse those things, what we do is reify and buttress whiteness and white supremacy culture, right? So race is how we are read and treated in the world. And I'm gonna look at you because we're both mixed, right? And so I am read and treated differently depending upon where I am, right? So that's not even something that we get to identify. And then culture, that is the way that we are raised, our tradition, right? And ethnicity is our geographic place of origin. So we have to be really sure to separate those things. And I say that because the other point that, I'm gonna look at you because so many of our horrific textbooks are published in Texas, so I'm gonna put that all on you. So what we don't have here in the United States is, as a whole, unless we have sought the information ourselves, is an actual understanding of what has happened on this soil, right? And so to seek out history for yourself, if you have a moment, you can read Howard Zinn's A People's History. If you have children in your life, you can buy them a Young People's History. You can read Ibram Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning. I mean, you could, there are many things, but the work has to be your own education. And so that's something you can always do in a wholly white space. I think that Robin DiAngelo does a great job in White Fragility of honoring that she is using the work of Black and brown and Native folks that has been available for 100 years, and this is the first time that it's palatable for white folks because she is a white woman. And so to enter that space with a scholar, a white scholar who can reach other white folks, I think is really, really important. So that was kind of meandering.
Thank you so much for that. Anyone else at this point? Absolutely.
You know, here I need to remember my beloved wife, who sees me having this experience, reading Kendi, reading Ta-Nehisi Coates, thinking about the brothers that I grew up with in Boys Town who are in prison or dead or in institutions because they couldn't acculturate. And my wife looks at me as I walk out the door, as I'm talking about racist justice and things like that, and she says, "That's great, baby." And she said, "When you get done that, let's talk about the women. Let's talk about what has been done to women." She's very sensitive about that, you know. If you think about the intersectionality of a Black lesbian woman, or, you know, the way these things can be really triangulated in all kinds of ways. But when we talk about social justice, it's not just a race thing, it's a gender thing, it's an ageist thing. I mean, I have a mother-in-law who's totally deaf. The services for deaf people in this country are almost non-existent. So it is an interdependent issue. And that's part of the work too, you know. What we have historically done to women in this world, you know, is another one. So, you know, in the meanwhile, we have a climate crisis. And so I just wanted to give a shout out, not only to the very specific racial issues, but the gender issues, you know, the misogyny, the harassment, you know, all this stuff. And, you know, that's something that is on the plate too. It's on the table too.
May I go back and just address your question, just from my own perspective? I really think you start slow, if you have to, right? There are some districts that are ready for this, and I say go, full speed ahead. But for a district as you described, one person at a time, there's someone on your staff, there's someone there that you can have a conversation about this with. The two of you begin, and then it spreads. And that's what I'm going to encourage. And so if it is between the world and me, I don't know if I'd start with Ta-Nehisi Coates, that's a little deep, but if it's putting a little snippet of an article, whatever it is, right? If you put it in the teacher's lounge, and somebody goes, who put this crap in here? But somebody else reads it and goes, I don't think it's crap. Now you've got a third person. And then you build out that way, and then you can get that momentum going. I just think, sometimes you've got to know your situation and build it slowly.
Just to clarify, I forgot that you asked that question. Start with stress. Don't talk about the other stuff. Bring the mindfulness into them in terms of what's happening in their own bodies. There's a lot of oppression going on right there. So help teachers deal with stress and the toxic and the biology of stress and adverse childhood experiences. Just help them deal with stress. Tell those teachers, the reason I'm bringing this to you is because when you retire, what happens to teachers in public education when they retire? They got this big pension, they've given 30 years of their life to commitment, and then they retire. What happens? A lot of them die. So you go in there and say, forget it, be strategic. First let's just start off with stress. Let's get ourselves into a place where we're just taking care of ourselves. Then as they start doing that, they'll start opening up and they'll say, well, what are some of the things that are causing stress? And when you ask that question, one of the first, they'll tell you, you won't have to tell them. They'll tell you that these things are on the plate.
Thank you. And I also want to add that I love that Barnaby coined the book that we've put out as a field guide. I've read 6 chapters so far, and it is really so informative. It's anecdotal, and it's strategic, and it's sharing about things that not only our panelists or myself and other members of COSM have written in the book, but it talks about what has been tried, what steps were taken, how has it gained traction. And so I can't recommend enough just reading some of those stories and getting the ideas. There are so many ideas in there that have already been tried and implemented that will start to plant the seed for you. And as Cheryl just named as well, I was like putting an article in the teacher room. What I did when I started at my high school as a principal and people were having a hard time having these conversations, and not just having the conversations, we have a hard time making time to have the conversations. I started offering just optional, because people want to talk about it if the space is made, optional 1-hour talks after school monthly. And then we kind of picked up some traction where smaller groups wanted to have them more frequently. But we limited it to just 1 hour. I would give out a 2 or 3 page article, because that's all we really have time to really read. And the first one I did was from an Essence magazine article on Monique Morris's Push Out, the criminalization of Black girls. And teachers came to that talk. They wanted to talk about, why are the Black girls being so loud? What does that mean? Why does it look like they have an attitude? So we were having all these conversations, and I opened up the conversation with, I used to be a Black girl, and it still doesn't make me an expert on how to teach Black girls. And that just kind of broke the ice, and there were people in the room that started talking about some of the specific challenges they were having with some of our Black girls, again, who didn't look like me, and were able to start to troubleshoot and problem solve. So now we had teachers in high school sharing about what they were doing that's working with the girl who's having the problems with this other teacher who can't get it to work, kind of thing. So they were solving each other's problems. We were having literally conversations organically about equity, culturally responsive teaching and learning, and strategies that work.
At the end of the meeting, we'd take 5 minutes. People would write on poster paper some of their ahas and epiphanies and markers. I color copied the front of that book, glued it in the middle, and put that poster up in the staff room. And people started coming more and more because they were seeing it was non-threatening. They're seeing their colleagues have these ahas and epiphanies and breakthroughs and learn things. And so start with the people who want to start. Because people want to start, they're just not finding the room to start, the space to start, the courage. Your courage is going to inspire others to be courageous in this. That's how it works. We give each other permission through our action.
15 minutes.
All right, here we go.
Just on what you said, what advice do you have for starting those conversations when you don't have those racial allies in the building, and when you've worked in a building that is all 100% white women?
Take care of yourself. Don't try to be Johnny Hero. You don't get all messianic and saviorist, right? Read the situation. You know, maybe there's another place for you to be. You know, do things for yourself. Seek out the people who you would like to have people get woke by. Develop some relationships with some of these folks that we're thinking about all the time. I buy from black-owned business. I go up to people in coffee shops and sit down and say, you know, I say, hey, here I am. I'm aware of the situation. We need to talk to each other. I've never had that happen and not had a person say, you're damn right, let's start talking. Go just embody the practice. Embody your commitment to dismantling that through your own behavior. An ounce of behavior is worth a pound of words. Keep it that way. An ounce of behavior. That we did an exercise around moving in space. When you walk into a room and if there's just one person of color, is there one person of color in your environment or is everybody white?
There's a lot of diversity with the students.
So be intentional. Go connect with those students. Go find out how their families are doing. Do it in front of other people when they see you. Be an infiltrator.
Can I say, since coming yesterday, the first session, I've been texting people and emailing about this experience. I have loved every millisecond of it. If you went back and talked to one person and said, hey, this is what I did for the last few days, I gotta tell somebody about it. It was just so awesome. You know, it built up an awakening within me. I know this can help so many other people. Just gotta talk to somebody about it. There's your start. Again, I'm gonna keep saying it, right? You've gotta do something. You don't have to do anything big, just something. It can be small. And that's what I'm saying. Just little small. I think that's gonna be a huge benefit.
I would also add one of the most important pieces of advice that I've ever been given was your work is with your people, talking to me. So yeah, sharing, talking with your people, talking with the white people on your campus. Because like I mentioned earlier, we can't rely on people of color to have these conversations. We need to be having these conversations with each other. So see it that way. I used to see it in a different way, where it's just like, well, it's just all a bunch of white people. We can't talk about race. Nope. It's a big growth for me. So thank you for asking the question.
Thank you. Very rich conversation. It doesn't end. This is a journey. This work is a journey. We have been up here, we've been up here a long time, that too. We have been doing this work a long time, and it's a continuum about how long we've been doing it, both mindfulness and equity work. we are nowhere near done. We are nowhere near done. And so we've taken ownership of our own learning. We have tried things, we've failed sometimes. Whew.
Yes.
In this work though, you always fail up. If you can practice some cultural humility, you'll always fail up. Okay? And so be patient with yourself, be generous with yourself, be curious, stay curious. Invite liminal space in. And the other piece is self-care. Self-care is so critical. And sometimes for me, and I used to be embarrassed to say this, but now I know the importance of it. Sometimes for me, my self-care is, I don't want to talk about race for the next 2 days. I don't want to watch a black movie. I don't want to see a slave film. I don't want it on the table for a while. I just want to be. It's almost like I almost take off and shut down an equity lens, kid you not. Okay, because sometimes you need some space to just be and breathe. Because this work is, it's warriorship. Okay, it's battling. And sometimes you have to retreat from that space and be kind to yourself. That doesn't make you less woke. That doesn't make you a simp. That doesn't make you a punk, as we said the other day. It doesn't bring you out of the work. You're just going back to strengthen. And so before we do our activity, I leave you with one of my favorite quotes that has helped me survive in this work. It's by Audre Lorde. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. So we will win this. But it is a marathon, it is a journey, and we will win. We are winning. So, thank you. And we're going to do it. Short activity before we go to lunch. There's a little bit of a challenge in it, and I'm really going to only give you 60 seconds. I don't want you to overthink this, okay? There's a lot of diversity and equity in this room. I'm going to give you literally 60 seconds, and it could be simply the person at your table, it could be someone at a different table. But you're going to get 60 seconds to find someone in the room who you think is different than you. Ageism, colorism, height, gender, ethnicity, whatever you think feels different to you, looks different to you, like, so don't overthink it, it's okay, we don't all really know each other. So don't over-personalize it. But just find that person, and then when you find them, you're gonna sit in front of each other, totally facing each other, almost knee to knee, but not touching. Okay? Pair up, please, 60 seconds, that's it. All right, because there are no trios or anything, it doesn't look like that for this. Okay. Anyone who's by the door, please close the door. Thank you. Because we're all teachers and we'll try to remember with really cool activities, Don't try to remember this activity. It's Googleable. I will give it to you. All right? Right. So please, just be in this and enjoy it. And maybe you won't enjoy it. Just feel it. Feel it. So the invitation is that you're just going to listen to my voice, follow the instructions, and I'm going to ask you to open your eyes several times throughout, and I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. When you open your eyes, look into the person's eyes. Okay, gaze into their eyes until I ask you to close your eyes. Okay? So please close your eyes. And just simply engage in a mindful moment in a way that feels good for you. Just breathing from our bellies. Please open your eyes. And close your eyes. And simply becoming aware that there's a person in front of you, a fellow human being, just like you. And I invite us to consider a few things. This person in front of me has a body and a mind, just like me. This person in front of me has feelings, emotions, and thoughts, just like me. Please open your eyes and close your eyes. This person in front of me has at some point in their life been sad, disappointed, angry, hurt, confused, just like me. This person in front of me has in their life experienced physical and emotional pain, suffering, just like me. This person in front of me wishes to be free from pain and suffering, just like me. Open your eyes and close your eyes. This person in front of me has experienced many joys and times of happiness, just like me. This person in front of me wishes to be healthy, loved, and have fulfilling relationships, just like me. This person in front of me wishes to be happy, just like me. Please open your eyes. And close your eyes. Now, let's allow for some wishes to arise. I wish for this person in front of me to have the strength and the resources to navigate the difficulties in life. I wish for this person in front of me to have the strength and resources to navigate the difficulties of our work. I wish for this person in front of me to be free from pain and suffering. I wish for this person in front of me to be happy. Please open your eyes. Please close your eyes. And now, if you'd like, I invite us all to try extending these wishes even further. May everyone here in this room be happy. May we all be free from suffering. May we all be at peace. And let us take a moment to allow our mind to rest. To rest in whatever is arising, to rest in this moment of what is. We bring our attention back to the person sitting in front of us. And we wish that this person be completely loved, because this person is a fellow human being. This person is a fellow Kazakh warrior, just like me. I'm going to ring the bell, and when you can no longer hear the bell, simply open your eyes. Please thank your partner in a way that feels good for So before we go to lunch, part of us being teachers and part of us being leaders is that we're always modeling what the experience can also be like. And we've probably been part of a lot of equity conversations that don't feel good when they end. And so when I teach, I talk about having a bell-to-bell experience, not bell-to-bell instruction, bell-to-bell experience. So when we have equity conversations, when we do our equity work, we end with connection. We end with the basis and greatest root of our humanity, which is love and connection. Okay. Get those really good feel-good hormones flowing back again. re-regulating the nervous system, coming back to self, coming back to wholeness. Right? So remember that when you start having these conversations and venturing out and practicing some things, bring everybody back. Bring everybody back together. Okay, Miss Tracy.
Thank you, Toby. Let's